So we end up with having a mastership service or leadership or...
Yeah, that's going to be there. Assume it.
There is some service which we call leadership service.
Well, mastership ownership.
Ownership service, okay.
We'll decide on the name.
Kamal was right. We're using leader for Sharpie.
So that's used for the master-slave visibility and master-slave election for the application terminology, which is outside of the data store terminology. So that's portable to the Lithium. Is that correct? That could be built on top of the Lithium.
It's a new API.
It's a new API, so we, do waivers and whatever we have to do.
Okay.
Whatever the process is. Right?
The process isn't there yet. No. We will create it.
We'll create a process or whatever.
No, this is an addition, so this is not modifying any API.
So, but original intention of the Lithium of the SRs are bug fix only branches. Right. Addition is not a bug fix. Strictly speaking.
Bug, right?
Missing clustering support? Yeah, I could classify everything as a bug.
Of course. So this is a bug that happens to need to introduce a new API.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's what it is.
So that's legal. That falls under the
Okay, so this is targeting the Lithium. We have a mastership service. In its current form as is proposed. It will change over the time.
Okay.
So that's the ownership service. Then the another step is to take use of that ownership service in the OpenFlow clustering. Fortunately, OpenFlow clustering could be built without introducing any new ACA-related thingies. Just using the leadership service and voting. Yes. The next topic which was we discussed how to do the Netcom clustering in such a way that it doesn't depend on which node you are using. You have access to the whole Netcom solution. You have access to all the Netcom operations available. There were two solutions proposed. One was basically the proxy. The connection is terminated on the node where it was configured. And the second was to have a full mesh. The combined solution is you have a full mesh, you have a master node, and all the requests are always routed to the master node. So given that, if we go that, to proxy the Netcom function and to route the information, all the Netcom functionality there, we will need to do small bit repackaging of the clustering. Because the Netconf itself is a tree service, is a combination of the data broker, notification broker, and RPC broker.
It implements its own, right? It implements the same interface.
Yeah, it implements the same interface. And what we did for the root MDSAL is we have ACA clustering and remoting for these services, except the notifications, but we will do that probably. This pulls up. This actually creates us remoting of the MDSAL using the. This creates us the remoting of the MDSAL using the ACA, which we could use for the Netconf and which we could use for scaling out into the separate instances which are running different services and so on. So the Netconf clustering, if we go with all connected to everywhere and the proxy function, you still need that proxy function there to route the requests, which is network clustering. It's Netconf clustering. Oh, we have a scribe.
Just trying to. That's why you won the award.
Yeah.
That's great.
You are scribe. You are official Open Daylight scribe from now on. So I can use you when I will dictate the code and you will write it down?
Don't draw any pictures. Don't draw any pictures. So if you're working on the award for next year, you start right now. Yeah. I got to do something, man.
Okay, so
can you explain how the proxy would work? I mean, you want to go into a little bit more detail?
So the proxy function is we need to make a Mountpoint service. I will use this one. Sure. So the idea behind the proxy, which was discussed and whiteboarded afterwards the session ended, is you have a 3-node cluster, or in the future, a lot of nodes. you have a user application. This could be external application, internal application. It doesn't matter from the MDSAL perspective in this use case. Talking to the Netcom device here. Netcom device is connected here.
Okay.
And what you really want is to route the request up here.
Correct.
So we will have a remote mount point.
So the routing
practically.
will be done, so when the request is made, will it end up at the Netcom connector on this node?
So,
And then it has to be routed this way.
so what we have in the MDSAL currently, it's called Mountpoint service. Mountpoint service needs cluster-aware implementation. And it will spin up a remote mount point implementation here, which will do the request. And this will be true for all the nodes.
Okay.
Similar way how we are handling the RPCs, we are instantiating the RPC proxy in the controller node, in all the controller nodes, which does the routing via ACA to the node which implements the RPC.
Okay, so to enable this, to make it similar to RPC, this is going to be like a delegate. If the request comes to Netcom connector, it doesn't find it here, so it delegates to something else.
Yeah, it comes to the Mountpoint service. So you will register local Mountpoint service, which different implementation. Mountpoint service allows you to have multiple implementations,
Okay.
as anything in MDSAL. You will register the implementation which is baked by the ACA to route it to delegate to route and delegate to the real implementation on the remote node.
Okay.
You know, Tony, it sounds like, or both of you guys, it sounds like the same, it sounds like very similar to RPCs. And we do gossip for that. I wonder if they're, using that for gossip.
Yeah, there is a gossip for that.
Gossip is, you know, so everybody knows about all the Netcom, where they are.
Yeah.
It's similar
I'm just wondering,
And maybe use RPCs going forward as the remote mechanism.
if you connect over here, and let's say I get the schema from the device, why can't I just register all the RPCs on this as routed RPCs over here, so that if a request is made, like an RPC request is made, I use RPC connector to actually.
Oh, and now we come to the harder part.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah.
We use the RPCs.
And now we come to the harder part of that. Java applications are written against concrete model. This model is present in all the controllers where the application is deployed. Netconf is not. Netconf are using the model learned from the device, which are then in effect used by the RESTconf. So, and the Mountpoint contract is the Mountpoint contract is four core MDSAL services together. The Mountpoint contract is, you have the RPCs, which are routed in its own domain of that Mountpoint. In Netcom, it's really simple, it's just forwarding to the device. You have the data broker contract. So basically you could read the data. You have notification contract, and you have a schema service contract. Because the Mountpoint itself can have its own schema. That's the difference. And basically, there is a proxy which needs to be accessed by the RESTconf in order to learn the schemas to provide the REST APIs for that particular Netcom device. So Mountpoint is much more heavyweight than just RPC.
Yeah, it's a schema, so you have a proxy schema.
So that schema needs to be distributed here and here in order, if the RESTconf is running here, to use that schema for XML, for JSON and XML parsing.
In order to parse it, it needs
No, which is fine. The schema can be distributed, right? Which is fine,
Yeah.
so that RESTconf can actually work properly over here. But why can't I still have, like, if I have a connection over here, all the RPCs in that schema, why can't it be registered as routed RPCs over here, so that if I invoke it from here, it somehow ends up.
So, the other concept, which is a bit different for the MDSAL. MDSAL is hierarchical. From the day zero, there was an idea that you have a root MDSAL. This one represents the controller. And then you could have a nested MDSALs, which have different properties. Similar to the shards, which may have different properties, basically, which currently represents the remote Netconf nodes. And the RPCs are not registered back to the MDSAL, because here I implement a get schema RPC, which represents our controller. And root MDSAL implements the get schema in its own context. This is the schema of the controller. And this Netcom device, it's different context. Its get schema is different from the get schema in the controller context.
You're saying that if I register an RPC, the registration will stay here, it won't come here?
Yeah.
And so I can't invoke it?
Yeah, because the idea behind the mount points was originally that since we are dealing also with the remote device, we don't want to rewrite the Yang models. Okay, this is the Yang model of the Netcom device in the controller. No, we introduce a mount points which says, okay, this is the context. This is data store notifications RPCs, which are defined by different schema that controller is using. And in order to avoid the conflict, you are not tailoring them together, that everything is automatically propagated here, because here we could use the same RPC for rendering the controller as a netconf node, or the same RPC for the restconf, or for different. So the controller hierarchy is there since, so the MDSAL hierarchies that you could have MDSAL talking to remote MDSAL, that conceptually is there from the day zero. And that's how the netconf actually is implemented, is that it behaves like named MDSAL, with different context, which is different schema context, with different model loaded. This is the difference. But yeah, you could have same model loaded, and then you go into the thing that this RPC in the controller is implemented by us, represents the controller, in the netconf it represents the netconf.
What happens when I have an application that's running within the controller which has to interact with the mount point? It interacts using the mount point service, which is fine.
Yeah, it gets the mount point service, and it gets from the mount point service it gets the mount point, which has really similar APIs for the
But the schema
API.
already knows, because that's how, we use the schema to actually generate the binding aware code.
So that's true for the binding aware applications.
Correct.
But binding independent applications goes to the netconf device and uses the schema which is associated with the netconf device.
So binding aware does not use the schema from the netconf device?
It uses. Actually, there's a safety net. There's a safety net, and that's the difference, actually, that binding aware. What's the binding aware contract? The binding aware contract is I'm compiled against this version of the Yang model. And I'm expecting this version of the Yang model. So if you are using a binding aware, we need to have a schema, your schema. And actually what happens is when the netconf device is connecting, you have a binding aware application here. Here is a netconf connector, which is DOM-based. It downloads the schemas. And here is a restconf. And actually, what happens? When you are getting the data from the netconf or the restconf, from the netconf, these data are parsed and used using the model downloaded from the device. Restconf uses the models and schemas downloaded from the device. But once you are going to the binding aware applications, the binding aware applications were written against concrete model, which you compiled. Here, the binding aware collects, gets the data which were interpreted according to the schema of the device, and interprets them according to the schema you were compiled against. So that's the safety net if the schema doesn't match, or we can detect that. And actually that's enforcing the contract. I am compiled against these versions and device, and this is a device-driven version. So you have a security, there is a context handoff from applications which interpret the model to applications which are written against concrete Java model, concrete version of the model. So that's why you don't have the schemas of the netconf device in all the nodes, and they could be learned dynamically, and you need to also account for that.
Any reason why you're referring only to NetCom?
Could you repeat that?
Any reason why you're referring only to NetCom? That's valid for every device, approach, or every application.
No.
Be limited in
So the netconf is currently one example when of the device where actually the models are learned during the runtime, and the model of the device is not loaded into the controller and installed in the controller at the compile time when you are creating your applications.
But the clustering needs to be generic, not
Yeah. So
but an agent or application or something resides in the component one
Ye-
controller that's running in a specific space of one instance of the controller, then you want to approach that from a
I know. That's just that's concrete example what's already there, We can talk about the applications which are doing pretty crazy stuff and how the clustering works for them. Netconf is just yet another application. That's correct. Yeah. There are two types of the applications. There are two types of the application in the empty cell sphere, which are the applications which are compiled against the concrete model. So the model is loaded in the controller, and then there are the applications which interprets model, and it depends how that model came to the existence. In the netconf, that model is loaded externally. Some applications can come bundled in the model. So if you are assuming that you have a clustering of the same, you have same nodes in the cluster, that model is present on the old nodes. But in the netconf, where only one node is connected to the netconf node, there is that one first node has different model because it downloaded the models from the controller, and now you need to replicate that models all around the controller. If you are only thinking about the applications which are running in the controller and not thinking about the possibility that there could be models introduced dynamically during your runtime, you don't need to deal with the problem that I do not need only to distribute data, I need to also distribute the models of the data. So that's the difference, and that's why I'm mentioning the netconf. It's first example of the application which isn't just application which is written for one model. This is application written for the multiple models which are learned during the runtime. Such application is also the cluster data store, but netconf gives you the possibility that these models could be learned anytime you are running, not only on the startup.
Yeah, but anyway, if you work with the remote, then you have to work with some kind of a DAO, some kind of a proxy anyway. So
Yeah.
you can expose even if the model is not loaded.
I know. I'm just giving this as a concrete example people are familiar with, which is already there. I can talk theoretically about all the crazy applications I have in my head, but discussion will be more abstract. So for example, one consumer of this application which relies on the dynamic models distributed is actually what I was drawing here is a Resconf. Resconf is a guy who takes any model which is currently available and renders your REST APIs based on that. And that's how we achieve that. And by having that models are dynamic, loaded at any time in a runtime, we achieved that RESTconf could actually provide REST API for any application in the controller. If you yank modeled it, you had the RESTconf support.
Okay. Also, you need to think about how you look up where that model is. So some look at some kind of a mapping to understand where that model exists. Whether a network agent, whatever you call it, exists, so it can reside any place in the cluster.
Anna, yes, we know that. So that's actually there is a Mountpoint service, which is the directory of different Netcom devices connected to the controller, to single node instance. That's the Mountpoint service, that's the directory. Each Mountpoint instance could have its own schemas. So we have that service in the single node. Now we need to make it cluster aware. And that's what we were discussing actually, how to achieve that. In a way that we will not rework it in following updates, which were basically scaling out it to nodes running very different services and so on.
Is there a suggestion to use the list mapping service to expose the location of that entity?
Why? The list mapping service is built on top of us. We cannot use them to provide the service for us. You will have a cycle. So in different deployment, it's pretty okay. We can have a list mapping service also as a distribution algorithm there. So we are figuring out the core concepts on which you could build the solution, which will be akka-based, list mapping-based, HTTP-based, RESTconf-based, netconf-based. The MD-cell is more about messaging patterns and that small glued code which allows anyone else to plug their own remoting layer there. As I mentioned before, there are efforts which are going to do the MD-cell messaging over the AMQP to integrate with AMQP software. There are efforts there is an effort which is reference implementation, and reference implementation will be done on akka. But we are not precluding you to use different solution if you need it. and if it makes sense in the deployment. There is no one true answer to all the problems, except the 42, but that's different.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment about the Netconf device. Normally, a Netconf device has a limited Netconf sessions you are allowed.
Oh,
So, yeah, you don't want to be full mesh the Netconf sessions.
yeah, and OK, that's an additional valid data point for full mesh versus.
Not going to, right? Because we have decided we're going to go this way.
Yeah, we go with the routing way. That's
When you mount a Netcon device, or you do a Netcon mount over here, the connection will be here, and the schema will be passed on to the other nodes, so they are aware of it. And then later on, if a request comes in, either from the like an app, internal app, or outside, there will be a proxy on this node, which will route the request to the master.
That actually defeats one purpose you are doing a high availability because you only got one connection.
yeah, and the addition to that is, if this go away, we will start session here.
If you have an expensive device, you cannot afford to at that short moment. It's losing.
OK, so we will have connections over here. This will be in the standby mode, which means goes into the full mesh mode, or not full mesh, but partial mesh mode. Yeah, it's partial, and once these go away, that proxy gets steered down, and that proxy is rerouted here.
So we're talking about 1+1? Is it 1+1?
It depends. Really, Netconf is capability driven. It depends. A lot of the things in the Netconf are harder, and that's also why I am putting it usually as the example. The Netconf is capability driven protocol with dynamic models and with different access patterns. Actually, capabilities could provide you with there are at least 3 types of the Netcom devices I am already aware of. Is when you can have only the one writer to the device, so you have one candidate store and master. There are devices which allows you which doesn't allow you at all to stage the changes, which you always write to the running, which are more like OpenFlow. And there are devices which supports multiple candidate configs, which is per session, where you could actually have a multiple masters and prepare some state from one session, the second state for the second, and the third. The Netconf, how they designed the Netconf is that they left a lot of architectural space and implementation space and vendor-specific space for extensions, so that to use that protocol in SDN actually needs to thought hard about it. It's not OpenFlow. OpenFlow, it's easy. In some cases. Then you go and read between the lines in the OpenFlow, and you will figure out, OK, and this is a problem for me as a controller, which could be solved somewhere else, much more nicer. So the Netconf gives you a different aspect how you look at the sessions and connections, and that's not true only for the Netconf. And you could talk generically about the applications, but if you go protocol to protocol, you will see on their specific things you need to take into account when designing the solution. Given that the next one probably, I'm not sure how the SDN world is interested into it, but SNMP, that's stateless protocol. You will have different requirements there. And if you want to make your OpenDaylight successful over the time, there will be a need for SNMP support, because you have a lot of devices there, and we cannot play the game like, OK, we have the OpenFlow world, and now we move to the OpenFlow, and we support all OpenFlow only, and that's the solution. No, you need to do a rollback, and vendors will, or not vendors, users will be asking for OpenDaylight-like solution for their legacy networks, or for their current networks. I don't like to call them legacy. I don't think they are legacy networks.
So what are we saying here? We'll be having 2 sessions down to the network element because one does not provide ditching?
2 or more. Depend on the device, what device support, what capabilities device support, if I'm able to take use of the more sessions. But that's not in the lithium time frame. That's harder, that's probably beryllium and after. You need to scope that.
2 or more will not be active activity. It will be more failover.
Yeah. Netconf usually, or most of the Netcom devices out there currently assume single writer. you're writing a configuration. Having two folks writing the configuration at the same time doesn't work, doesn't fly. Because then there is the problem, and that's common problem for all the applications, will be the Netconf device doesn't know the intent of the folk configuring it, so it doesn't know how to resolve the conflict. So you better want to have a single master, single writer currently. With the configuration-like models, which also the OpenFlow is, they may play games that they are not configuration-like, but OpenFlow is also configuration-like model. Multiple masters is multiple problems.
Tony, you said earlier in NetConf subscriptions, I mean, you get notifications only if you establish the subscription through that session.
Yeah, so you could use another session if the device supports multiple sessions to offload the primary session and so on.
So are we suggesting in the standby connection, we will establish?
That's not already, oh, so there is a connection, and that's not standby anymore. That's active slave. That's master slave.
So that is my concern. That if you did not, like earlier, the concern was momentarily you might lose some notifications. I'm saying even with the standby connection, you might lose some anyway because that session got lost.
So, and now we are back to the capability-driven. Netconf allows you to replay, some Netconf devices allow you to replay the connection, replay notifications for a particular point of the time. So with the Netconf, as an example, it gets a bit different that you have multiple possibilities how to solve the problem. It depends to whom you are talking, to which device you are talking.
Yeah, at least I don't know the state of the art in available NetConf devices. Is the standby connection buying you that?
So for example, that event source manager I mentioned, it has a support that it detects the disconnect, it remembers the last time step it saw on the notification, and if the session is still down and reconnected and device support replays, it starts replaying the notifications from the last observed point. So that's the Netconf for you.
No, I don't take this picture because this is like, intermediate.
Oh,
You know,
there's a concern this will cause more confusion.
yeah, exactly. Thoughts on paper or something.
I do not make assumptions.
Because most of the devices do.
I assume every component you will be talking, actually when I'm designing something, me personally, my assumption is everything out there is buggy, even my own code. I do not make assumptions, it works out of the box all the time.
SNMP is also supposed to support replay. Hardly anyone's supposed to.
You don't want to support the replay actually in the network. Imagine if someone, and there will be some crazy idea in 5 years from now, till 5 years, that someone would want to have a replay for packet in the OpenFlow. You will see that. It will pop up somewhere. Okay, I think we figured it out, Netconf.
No, I think we should drill into the details as to what exactly happens on each of these nodes. So when you mount a device, what should I do about it? Right now we create one Netcon connector for each device that we mount, right?
So when you mount a device, you should start gossiping the information to the other devices that this will be the Netcom.
No, but forget about
Okay.
that. On a single instance, what happens?
When you mount device on the single instance, there is a connection established to the device.
Yes, but there is firstly a Netcon connector instance gets created.
Yeah, the Netcom connector instance gets
Then
created.
that establishes the connection with the device.
That establishes the connection to the device. Once the connection is established, it starts. This is not yet visible to MDSAL. It starts. It publishes. It states to the MDSAL data store that this Netcom device is connected, and it starts negotiating the session with the device, which is exchange of the hello messages. Based on the hello messages and learned capabilities, currently. We will go based on the exchange hello messages. If a device supports ITF Netcom monitoring, we will go and fetch the list of all the models present on the device as described in the ITF Netcom monitoring. If ITF Netcom monitoring is not available, we will guess the models of the device based on the hello message. Some devices doesn't report, and here, now to buggy world, some of the devices are supposed to expose all the models they have in their configuration in the hello message. Some devices doesn't do that. That's why we go and fetch all the models on the device, because we do not trust what they are, because we had a bug that some subset of functionality didn't work on the device because the device didn't announce it, so we didn't download the schemas for it. We go and download the schemas from the device. If the device doesn't support a schema download, inside the OpenDaylight there is a concept of the schema repository. Currently on the IETF Hackfest there was an extension that you could actually point it to the external locations where the schema are also saved, so we can download them from the external repositories. That's just proof of concept code, but it's based on the Yang models for the schema download. We have a file system cache which is loaded there, so we could sideload the models into the controller. Then based on the capabilities, the models are loaded. Once the models are loaded successfully, sometimes we do also additional checks to figure out, okay, if there is some model which is missing, we try to load as much as possible models of the device. Once the models are loaded, we register the mount point to the MDSAL with these models attached to it. Now that Netcom device is public and applications could access it. So when you hit it, for example, via Resconf, the mount point, the Resconf gets that schema model loaded and renders the APIs based on that. The Yang UI, which is present in the Lithium, goes, fetches the schemas from the Resconf device, creates UI based on that. Swagger UI also does that same, that goes, fetches the schemas which were learned from the device and renders the UI based on that.
I have a quick question. When you said this Netcom device, when I use the Helium version, I know your Netcom mounted device actually doesn't render actually the UI. Does that actually...
That's fixed in the Lithium.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
So what about young models that have custom extensions? Do you have any?
What do you mean by custom extensions? We do not interpret extensions. We don't know how to interpret the extensions.
So we don't support any.
So, why do I need to support the extensions? Give me example of the extension the controller needs to support.
For example, Taylor command.
Which one? Tail of action is only one I can think of.
Okay, well, let's take an example like that. So if we want a custom extension, can we generate in the APIs for that?
So what we are doing currently, and we plan to introduce in the Beryllium, is that you could load the bundles which will extend the parser, which drives the JSON codecs, XML codecs, and maybe some extension points to the RESTconf and NetConf, which will allow you to introduce the support for that extension. Given that the Yang extensions are not standardized, most of them is not standardized yet, we cannot go and promise you as an open source, and given that 3 or 4 contributors which are actively working on Yang tools and NetConf together will support all the extensions out there. That's really hard scope. So what we will try to do is to provide enough extension APIs in order for you to contribute back the tail-off action support. So did you actually subscribe to contributing back to tail-off action support?
I think we have to. We've been getting a lot of problems with Taylor.
So actually, this session is also about to figure out how you could help us.
Yeah, I guess we have to do something about Taylor. It's scary.
Is this scary? But there is nothing free for you. You need to contribute back somehow. Otherwise, we will quit that, and because we will be tired and burnt out.
Okay, I guess I have to talk to you about that.
Okay, back to my question.
We are pretty much getting off topic.
All right, so
That's
when,
what.
when there is an application which tries to invoke an RPC on the mount point,
It first fetches the mount point.
first fetches the mount point, and then like on the
And
mount point,
on the mount point, it invokes the RPC.
it doesn't call invoke RPC on it.
It gets the get RPC service. If it is binding application,
Okay.
it gets the RPC service proxy and then invokes the RPC. Pretty much normal stuff as you do with the MDSAL.
Is there a binding independent component
Yeah, there is the DOM version of that.
There's a
That's the
DOM
core.
The same thing. Okay.
There is an invoke RPC.
Okay, there is an invoke RPC that will happen at
Yeah.
that point.
The same you were implementing for the remote RPC broker.
Which is fine. So now let's say we try to invoke an RPC on a component which is not local. So there's no NetCon connector, local NetCon connector.
You need to route that RPC to the correction.
How would I find out about it? Is my question. Because
You find out the first when you go fetch the Mountpoint. You found out that Mountpoint is remote.
Okay.
So we need to register in the case of the clustering.
No, but to even be able to give a remote mount point,
Oh, okay.
I need to. How do I know that I should give you a remote mount point?
So we got to the point that Netcom published the Mountpoint to the MD
So,
cell.
yeah, we connected. We tried to mount something over here. It connected over here. Now as a local mount point, and then
Information is in the config subsystem, right? The mount, the what to mount, like credentials.
Currently, yeah. Currently,
it
yes.
can also be passed. Oh, okay.
Currently, the configuration is in the Mountpoint, but we still could replicate the necessary information to establish the connection on the other side. The communication pattern here could be two solutions to that actually, is that we instantiate that proxy here, the remote proxy. We instantiate here at the time the first connection is achieved here. When the Mountpoint is published, it will also use, it will republish the remote Mountpoint here.
See, first thing is there has to be some component which knows about all the Netcom devices.
There has to be a component which knows about all the mount points.
Or at least all the local nodes. Okay, let's.
There is a mount point service. That's the component you are looking for.
Mount point service knows about all the mount points,
Yes.
all the local mount points.
Yes.
And it's able to pass on information about all the local mount points to all the other nodes.
To the users. To the users. Or if we extend it for the clustering, to all the nodes.
That's what I'm trying to do. So there
Okay.
has to be like a
Cluster area mount point service.
cluster mount point service.
Like
Yeah.
similar to the RPC registry. Similar how it used gossip to distribute.
Yeah, but this is actually going to be simple. It's not even going to be that complex. Because here you know exactly where the other nodes are. See what I'm saying? You know exactly you know exactly where the RPC is implemented. The real connection.
You know also that for the RPCs.
Well,
Yeah. I designed these APIs.
yeah, but the thing is that information has to be passed around. Okay, so
Yeah.
we have this.
So you pass around the information. There is a new mount point, which is on the node A. And on the node B, C, you instantiate the proxies based on that information.
Okay, so now the same thing applies to everything else. Like if I want to access data also, I just send it over to the.
Yeah, you get the mount point and send to the mount point.
Okay, and notifications now I send it to all the other proxies somehow. Right? If a notification happens.
You could track the notification. So you are providing your own mount point implementation. So in case of the notifications, you could track, your proxies could track the registrations on their own notifications, like you do for the RPC registrations. The proxy function is not just a proxy. It could track local state associated with how that node is used. And this is and you track that local state. So you will, if the notification is coming, and the listener registered here, that proxy could send an information back to here, the one who started gossiping that information, that listener is here, so you will route that notification and publish it only here, instead of publishing it here where it gets dropped because nobody is using it.
Which we don't have to do at all.
And that's what we are missing to have a Netcom clustering. Yeah,
Even if we build that, it would have to be in addition to whatever.
yeah,
It have to be here.
yeah.
So, in terms of actor system, I don't want to spawn another actor system. I think maybe a prerequisite for this is first move the actor system out.
See, like not only actor system, the RPC code of the registry one, that also
The
we
gossip
can
part
gossip
should be
one.
moved out.
We can
Yeah.
forward, yes, and that needs some optimization also.
So we are still on the multiple actor system. I didn't go into details.
No, we're not on multiple actor system. We are trying to get to resolution.
Okay.
So single actor system, shared across NetConf devices or whatever NetConf mount points, RPC, data store, and also maybe
Oh, we have Scribe here.
notification system. Remote notifications. Let's say
Yeah,
we support
so actually, yeah, we have a single actor system for the logical controller.
Correct.
Okay.
Because proliferation of actor system not going to happen.
So what is this? Just want to understand. So why are we having the notifications on the statements or on the proxies? Like,
So we would have them. I mean, if you register for a notification, the notification will be sent.
so the notification from the device will be sent to all the three.
Yeah.
No, to the ones where you have the listeners.
All the subscribers.
The ones where there are
Actually, and
Notification be sent only to the master node and then being sent across.
No, no, of course, from the device it will be sent to the master.
Oh yeah, that's not master.
Yeah.
So from the device, the notification will go to the master.
From year to year, year to year,
It
it
will
will
talk to the one.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, I just want to.
and actually, if you look at it, this brings us closer to the beryllium and boron. And after, which is we are running different services on different nodes, because this is one example of such service which is running on the different node already, which is just proxy to the C2 and C3.
Okay. But this is significant amount of work for next time.
I know.
So
I know about the amount of the work there.
what can we do in the internet?
So,
How big can we actually even do it?
within the NetConf, and if you have prioritization, what should highlight, for example, accessing data is probably the highest, then the RPC, then the notification.
Yeah, but then won't we have like a broken system? Because people will be expecting NetCon mounts to work fully. And then they would deploy it in a cluster and it wouldn't work.
so that's the question to go ask for the community. So probably we first should ask the folks which are doing the commercial distributions, because they are mostly with the hands in the customers currently, to figure out that priority.
Yeah, we want it. Commercial distribution.
For example, Cisco's use case, I don't know, notification, RPC is probably of course, everything would be nice.
I think we need to scope it. We need to scope this one because if it's going to take longer than lithium SR2, I think we have to do this.
Well, yeah, and also prioritize this against the
Beryllium.
OpenFlow is number one.
No, so it was supposed to write all the RPCs we have to do so that well, I know you just discussed this. I'm saying that just to print out so that so this yes, so that we can scope it. And then we can find out whether it's going to be really or
The beyond is the image which was drawn before, where you have separate Rescom, separates. That's boron and other, but in beryllium,
Extract the active system out into its own bundle so that it's reusable across components. That is the first. I think we need to start there because otherwise it will get hairy. Then I think we need to start working on the NetConf connector itself. So first on the mount point, give an alternate mount point
I
service.
think government also to extract the gossip messaging.
Yeah, the gossip. Yeah, we have to move the gossiping. I mean the gossip code which we have in the remote RPC connector. Move that out into like a component where we can share it.
Probably that's all clustering problem.
rename it to Akka clustering common.
There's one button also, it's fine, I think.
Yeah, something like that.
Then we need to provide an alternate implementation of the mount point service, which is a remote mount point service.
You don't need to provide alternate information. You could extend that. You could extend it.
Extend mount point service. Mount point service is a class.
No, the Mountpoint service, you could actually use the same trig we are using for the RPC broker with the Mountpoint service. The Mountpoint service isn't ever at all at the clustering, but you could do that seamlessly. You listen on the Mountpoints as they are created, and span of the remotes. Same thing you are using for the RPCs.
Okay, so then it will work the same way that it's working today for RPCs, where somebody tries to get a mount point. If it's local, you basically return it. Otherwise, you come to the remote mount point service, or like you delegate that call.
Or you, yeah, that's detail. But I think if not, then we could provide an SPI into the single node mount point service to hook the clustering extensions into it.
Okay. Anyway, remote mount point service needs to be created.
Yeah,
And
in way or other, the support for the remote mount points.
so, and actually that is the major work, isn't it? Making all the three things, RPCs, data access, and notifications work.
So
Like the remote mount point.
Yeah.
The remote mount point.
data access, we have that practically.
We have that, but that actually works like against our data store. So the data tree which we have embedded.
Yeah, so
is
we
not the
need,
same thing.
okay, so we need to extract the common pieces also from that.
I don't know what is common in there. I mean, does it?
There is a common, the common thing that there are transactions.
Essentially, if you try to do a transaction, instead of ending up on a shard, it ends up on a mount point, on a remote mount point.
Yeah.
So that then it gets routed to the device. Right? Basically, that's what it would be. I don't think, well, there is some client code which can be shared.
Okay, we will see. We need to analyze the existing code. How much we can
I think it's
use
going
the
to be
cool
more-
stuff there.
No, there's going to be more work to extract it out rather than write.
Write it again?
Yeah, because this is just a proxy, right? I mean, it's not doing much. The client is not going to be doing that much.
Okay.
That could be something which can be shared.
Yeah, we need to figure that out, details with code.
I mean, I don't know, I guess we get implementation details, but can we reuse
Just trying to.
routed RPCs as they are, as the kind of the bus,
As a way to actually even get to the data.
the bus for the mount point and for the transaction. Say, I want to read something. Well, just look at an RPC.
No, but the data is accessed to the transactions, even when it's against a mount.
Yeah, but actually, for example, the Netcom connector internal, if you look into it, it translates the transaction into the RPCs.
Oh, into
Edit config, get config, yeah, into Netcom RPCs. But that would be that we will be describing internal MDSAL protocol, also with the Yang. There is a good thing about it, and there is a bad thing about that.
Maybe to start off, we do that.
I'm saying, okay, it's a different, I mean, utilize the gossip, I mean, you said, to get the registrations and all that, I want to gossip it and all that, but if we could just reuse the whole remote RPC stuff.
As is.
And just define RPCs for the remote mount point communication, and just use that as a plumbing layer, routed RPC,
So
probably
are
glossing
you
over
saying that we
details,
come up
but.
with some Yang model which defines the RPCs, and
Yeah.
on each node
Yeah.
you register an RPC for a mount point, and
Yeah, and you route it on the node ID.
Right.
That's possible.
So we just get all that for free,
yeah.
just wrapping the down mount point service, just like remote RPC.
Yeah, I think that might. That's even better because you don't even have to introduce access points. All you have to do is just register for the right RPC.
Yeah, it's the fastest way how to get to there.
Define the Yang model and
What's wrong with it? There's nothing wrong with it. We're just going to reuse whatever we have. Except
Yeah.
for notifications.
And we have that.
Notification we don't
Yeah.
have.
So the implementation details needs to be figured out, and I don't think we will figure it out here.
The amount
Yet.
of work that needs to be done is going to be based on which approach we take.
Yeah.
This approach
And-
is faster.
exactly, you're reusing something.
And we are missing the last guy to discuss that actually, Marosh, which is the Netcom maintainer. So we needed to discuss that also with him.
Okay.
So that's the action item for you. Since I will be on the vacation next week, if you contact the Marosh with
I'm
the
also
proposed
taking a vacation
solution.
next week, so. Just to
Oh,
myself with
Quick, Tom, quick, Tom.
he was just joking. Okay, so
We have to recover from this dev forum.
so we got to the point that we have.
Okay. So I think your suggestion probably we'll just go with that. Notifications will have to solve. That'd be additional. Maybe do notification and something like this.
I mean, the Netcom, I don't know what, like that, I'm fuzzy on, so.
Notifications of submitted new APIs.
Exactly. I mean, we don't have, first of all, remote notification at all. With this Netcom solution, we will need remote notifications.
Remote yang notifications, right?
Question outstanding about implementation, how we will go with that, because probably Maros will be involved in actually implementation of the NetConf, and Tomasz, Sarah.
Well, is a notification a
might have
simplification of an RPC? It just has one term?
It's actually public subscribe. You need to have a registry of these subscribers in order to deliver it correctly.
Once you have the subscribers, you can invoke an RPC on all of them.
No, well, where I was going with this, could we even fit somehow as they say, make notifications fit under the implement
can be
that
done.
with remote RPCs, but I don't know. Maybe we're going.
Yes, we can. Why we should do it?
I don't know, that's what I'm saying.
So for lithium, if you want that, yeah. For beryllium, we need to figure something better, probably. Yeah, actually, you could change all the concepts to the ask pattern in the ACA, which is actually routed RPC. The ask pattern in the ACA is routed RPC. It maps 1-to-1.
What's required?
Yeah, the ask tell pattern.
We've already wrapped it around. We are using ASC.
Yeah, it's broken by design.
Broken by design again.
No. This will be my trademark.
Come up with some other kind of problem.
This will be my trademark.
Trademark. Broken by design. Tony.
Okay, and actually, also my code could be labeled with that sometimes. That's why I'm deleting more code than adding currently.
So, Tony,
I'm removing the traces.
Marosh is going to, Marosh has the time to work on this?
Or Tomasz, sorry.
Tomasz.
Yeah.
Because we might
Contact the
have,
Maros. Maros will put you together with the right
because
people.
we might have a person who can work on this.
Oh, it's even better.
See, we're helping you. Amit will work on that.
Okay.
This is Amit.
Hi.
See, you got your help.
Okay. What's next? Where we want to move?
Let's move to what are the missing features in clustering.
We could use the audience.
Actually, you were mentioning about, later on your roadmap of different nodes is doing different functionalities. Or you have a data-centric node, just do a data store. The application node just doing the application.
Yeah, I mentioned that.
Yeah. Would it worth to put it somewhere as a, your longer-term clustering roadmap or something? Or is it too much to that?
So that actually, what I mentioned is 2 steps down the line, 3 steps. So the idea is, and let's talk a bit about the beryllium to answer that question. I didn't get
Can you go to
the other committers yet on board
we have
with that idea. I need to convince them because it is
not this big.
it's somewhere in between about having a new APIs and having the applications feel like they are cluster unaware, but they are actually cluster aware. It's somewhere in between, and actually that's the definition. What's really the MDSAL is? Usually people see MDSAL as the RPCs, notifications, brokers, plus data store. If someone were following closely what is happening in the community, we are splitting off the MDSAL. and the data store is not part of the split. So MDSAL now becomes only a routing function, basically messaging patterns and routing functions. So over the time, in order to achieve actually having different services running in different controllers or different JVM instances, I will not say different nodes, different JVM instances. So you could have a different CPU caps on different services afterwards. There is a bug open for that. There is a bug open for everything, feature request. It's actually to treat the core MDSAL just as a routing function, which will figure out to which node you need to speak, or it is a local node. So that's the long-term plan actually, is to make the MDSAL just enough glue layer in order to route your requests where they should belong. If that is local or remote, to make actually location transparency for your application, if it is consuming a local resource or remote resource. That's what we are trying to achieve, is to provide that for already existing concepts in the MDSAL, which is in the Mountpoint or the RPC or the notification. So that's the longer plan on which we will probably be executing, because that's the promise of the MDSAL since day 0. That it should provide you basically that for the applications, it should provide you access to all the services in the logical controller. All Yang model services in the logical controller, to be more precise. But to give you actually timelines, if we will have the clustering solution. I'm not sure if it is clustering in its core sense of the word. If we have that solution in the beryllium, that will be probably overcommitting us. But probably boron. But in order to get that there, we will need to feedback from you. We will need help from you as a community. We always like new contributors. Contributors will come.
I think maybe we should check who wants to be a contributor.
Who wants to contribute actually to improve the MDSAL clustering, scaling, scale out story?
That's one. Sharon? That's a big one.
But I'm not sure that you
Actually,
like what I want to do.
No, you just have to do what we want you to do.
and that's pretty much it. Yeah. It cannot be anymore the guys just sitting at this table. They have all the other jobs to do.
I think there are 2 or 3 people who are interested.
Yeah, team of 3-4 people could be really.
Are we going to continue our MDSAL hackers call, or is that going to be merged into the MDSAL?
So,
Because there has to be some forum.
yeah, there should be 2 forums. Actually, one is this MDSAL Developers Forum or MDSAL Contributors Forum. Let's put it better named.
Okay.
So really the hackers which are working on that, and limited to the people who are actually contributing,
Okay.
probably, to keep us focused and do the pair programming on the call, and then a user call. Basically, users are the thing we need, and you are our customers in the open source sense.
The interest call.
Yeah, that's the MDSAL interest call. So we still have these 2 calls.
So we have 2 calls, and I think we can help people get on board and start contributing.
Yeah, and that's part of the interest call, probably.
And interest call.
So, I mean, we did have an MDSAL hackers and a clustering hackers. You kind of.
Yeah, we need to merge them actually, because
Can serve 2-1. Just Monday we have the call, and then that's it.
Tuesdays we have the call on the Tuesday.
Yeah. The
What
Monday
does the
ones-
hackers call?
The Monday hacker calls died out because everyone already went into the clustering call, and we ran out of the topics there.
Oh, so hackers is gone? I missed that. Is hackers gone?
So
Are the clustering hackers, I mean?
clustering hackers is there. There was yet another call which
okay.
were just the contributors actually there.
That was on Monday.
Monday
Oh, okay.
MDSAL hackers
the
call.
Tuesday, 8 a.m.
Yeah.
Okay, Pacific, okay.
That call wasn't held for Jan forgot to renew the WebEx, and from that time on we figured out we have 1 less call, 1 more hour to code.
Then everybody got happy that, oh, that's right, I don't have to go to that.
I have one more hour to code.
And I think for all the new contributors, we should have a mentor. So,
Yeah, it depends on the time zone.
so Tony will be a mentor for someone.
Who likes to wake up early in the morning? If it's from San Jose, if it is Europe, it's easier for me.
All right.
So did you want to go through that list? I mean, it's a big list.
Sorry.
It's 15 minutes, but, I mean,
There are some things here which we are already doing. I think we can ignore them.
but I think.
So we mentioned the remote not yang notifications as a part of the solution for the Netcom.
Right, the remote data change notification.
Yes, and
We already
already have the batch.
Right, so I think
It's a remote data change notification or remote data tree notification.
Data change.
both.
Yeah, both.
Actually, it does that. For
Oh, it's reads from the local follower and forwards the notifications?
Yes.
yeah.
That's the solution I want to see. Okay.
You are a reviewer on that.
It's a good thing you thought of.
I have, my review queue is, because everyone adds me automatically to reviews, my review queue is really large. And when it's touching clustering, I believe them.
Yeah, they are.
I trust them.
Yeah, but this goes into the MD cell.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had to
It's
make
fine.
changes somewhere. You should take a look.
So there's
yeah.
already a proposed patch to do notifications on all instances, so that's what that's about. So the listener can choose whether they want
It's opt-in API.
to opt in.
Problem, yeah.
It's opt-in API where the listener implements just additional marker interface in order to notify. Yeah, I am aware I will be receiving these notifications on all the followers and master.
Right, so that's there. You have this current leader only on leader. So that's the kind of stuff. Is there anything else for applications?
Someone was asking,
From this
yeah,
list,
To know. Go
yeah,
ahead.
from this list. Is this something that you care about? Come on, if you care about it, you have to build it.
no, I think
I'm
we
going
need,
to ask a question which might come more work for you guys.
So another thing notes which release you will have, like, which release I need to have that.
So we
Oh,
just prioritize
Thomas,
this.
could you start? That's a good question. Could you open also the tab with the controller release plan? So we are offset zero project. In 10, 20 days, we need to figure out what will be delivered in the beryllium.
We need to prioritize based on what the input that we gather from here. If it's important for you, then we'll start doing it first. Otherwise, something else. I mean, we already know what.
And that's our deadline for any new feature. 19 of the July, 17 of the September. That's the cost being offset zero project. We don't have a lot of time.
Well, this other API needs to be.
At least at beta quality.
Yeah, that's,
That's whole another thing, and I'm committed to work on that. Yeah. So, and that's the other part. What is going to that image? People were asking about the dynamic splitting, having the different storages, having a different ways how to do clustering. So it seems, and to scale out. So what we are proposing, and that's what Robert was proposing, is instance identifier-based microsharding, which is not that you have a shard per instance identifier, but it's much more like a mapping that you could map specific instance identifiers to specific shard. So instance identifier-based microsharding, which is proposed, gives us the possibility to have shard per node, which seems pretty per OpenFlow node, which is maybe will not scale, but actually increases the throughput of the system. But these APIs allows you also to dynamically create the shards. These are current proposed APIs are low-level APIs. They are not user-facing APIs. We could build additional wrapper APIs around that, which allows user to dynamically spin off new shard or affect the sharding strategy by registering a new shard. The difference is that MDSAL data broker, the in-memory data broker, is not in-memory data broker anymore. It's much more like a routing function on top of multiple data shards. And how these shards are implemented, it's in your hands. So it's a better concept than having the MDSAL supports two data stores. It could support instance identifier-based shards. Actually, this will allow you to have a specific part of the subtree persistent. For the different part of the subtree, there is no persistence. For the netconf state, ITF netconf monitoring, which is operational, you probably do not want even to replicate it across the controller because each netconf endpoint should represent its own state, not to the state of the whole controller. So this will allow more flexibility how your sharding will work and how you scale.
I think we should discuss this with some use case in mind. Exactly how we use this, this API.
Yeah.
How end users would make it. If end users are not going to use it, that's fine. How are we going to use it? I think we should talk. But before we go there,
Sorry.
from that list, is this, which are the, like, who is interested in adding new nodes in a cluster? So,
Is replacing your second node the same? Like if you node
yeah, basically
Yeah.
for great scenarios, right?
It's ACA provides, sorry, RAF provide a message node added up to loop. So we will be implementing that.
Yeah, but the idea is if you have, right now you have a static configuration, you have 3 nodes, and then you just deploy that. But if you want to upgrade nodes, you might want to bring one down, bring another one up, and dynamically join the cluster. So that's what that is. Is that what you're looking for?
That's a basic thing. Otherwise, I say, oh, I do a high availability thing. I had 3 nodes running. Oops, 1 node's down. What you gonna do?
Okay.
I cannot bring up a new one until I shut down everything, bring up another 3. That's like, okay, it's not really high availability. Right?
How soon do you need it?
Well, if you have it now, I can use it.
Yesterday.
Okay.
No, but your use case was that you got one node down
Yeah.
and
I want to dynamically fire up another node. Now it comes another 3 nodes.
another.
Yeah. I don't have maintenance when the goes down, right?
It's like you're replacing a
Yeah,
node
yeah.
in data set.
So in terms of interest, we have only one person in this room who's interested in it. So I think we
Is this a raft election?
No. The election, this kind of the,
so this can be, you'll have to wait till beryllium for this. Is that okay?
Well, I mean, that's also scale out, right?
Yeah.
so, no, there were question adding a node and replacing a node. There's 2 different things. No, adding a node, adding a new node, 4, 5, 6, and replacing a node.
You get 6, 7, 8.
Yeah, and replacing a node.
Which is fine.
And replace.
Replacing is built in today.
Okay.
a node is higher priority than
Yes, it was, right.
Replacing will work today.
Dynamically adding new.
You start up another node which says
to
this is
replace.
member 3.
Yeah, you just give it the same member
Yeah.
and whatever, same ID. If it has the same ID address, that's great.
So are you saying, let's see, right
That's
now if I have a
disaster
3 node cluster, right? One node went down. I look at, oh, that was member 3 went down. So I start a separate server. In there, I simply say this called member 3. Fire up, and then eventually it goes back to 3 nodes.
Yes.
Oh, okay, sure. Then I can wait for very.
Good. No, this is if you want to like add more nodes and then upgrade.
I have a question, because I really don't know. So if I between node cluster, does it necessarily say that all shards are on all 3?
Well, I can see that's anything.
You can configure it like
Like today I can say send inventory to that shard and send, what?
today it's static configuration, it's in a configuration file.
Yeah, but I can configure it before I load the cluster. So I can have 2 nodes containing inventory and 1 node containing configuration, right? I can do that today. Now,
What's the configuration?
Configuration store.
What configuration store? For what module?
Today there are two data stores, right? One is the operational and one the configuration. Can I have the operational one on two nodes and the configuration be on the other?
Yes, you can. Yes, it wouldn't work for the applications.
Today you can't do it.
Okay, so
It's random.
so so I'm going back to a use case. So let's say I have some switches, and the switch table is huge, right? So I would like some of the switch data on one shard and
So,
other on another one.
so Sharon, I'm not sure. You weren't there before in previous sessions? Actually, there was a question, and this is not. This will be probably beryllium or later, which is actually which I think is what you are asking for. Is that the nodes in the cluster are taking different roles? That you have two nodes, which serves for the switch connection. Here, you have two nodes which stores the switch data, or serves for the switch connection, and your third node serves as the application/configuration store. Is that correct?
Well, it's yes, but
So you don't have the so these nodes in the cluster take different role and actually even run different applications.
you asked me.
Yeah.
You're talking only about the data, right? You just want config data to be on some node and operational data on some node.
Not necessarily. I want
Specifically,
to be able to put some data on one shard according to some rules, and other data on another shard.
According different rules. That goes mostly into the dynamic sharding and fine grainer sharding, which is the beryllium items probably, if we make it. Which is instance identifier micro sharding, which allows you to bring your own micro shard, which if you have enough time, you could implement the storage using the Cassandra or using the MySQL in that shard.
is that what you want to do?
So,
And this allows you the flexibility actually to build your sharding.
I mean, 917 is basically all the features have code complete.
No, 917 is the features should be there in beta quality. So people can start playing out with them or start using them so we can so we have still 1 month for the users to figure out what they do not like about our APIs and how to improve them.
Okay, so, I mean, what is it on this little sublist here is the biggest thing, is that, which isn't even beryllium, it's lithium, which is, so, I mean, open flow clustering, which is gonna take a chunk out of all of this. Unless.
Isn't that OpenFlow clustering, OpenFlow project problem?
More contributors. Huh?
That's the OpenFlow plugin problem, not a controller problem.
There might be some services required.
I know. So limit the scope for the controller just to something which could be achieved in 2 days and then leave them to.
Sure. Okay, all right.
I mean, likewise, I mean, all these items here, I mean, finer grained sharding that we talked about, and that goes along with dynamically adding new replicas and all that. I mean, that's, to me, that's very, you and I have thought about it, it's complicated. And it's gonna take a lot of code, so that's just, you know, with all this stuff, it's gonna all depend on how many contributors.
No, in terms of this work,
You get them going in parallel.
firstly we have to ask Tony, does he even need us to be involved in that final thing?
I will need to
Unless you're doing it,
consult.
you're doing it.
Actually, I'm doing that. I'm moving out from the MD cell binding to the clustering currently. Binding is pretty much there. It's just set of the adapters, and there is not a lot of things to do. Just bring up the new adapters for new APIs. So I'm moving more to the backend side, to the sharding and clustering side. But I will need you to sometimes help me with DACA.
Are we going down the list and see what the room feels in terms of priorities, or no?
Actually, just use this to prioritize. I think we will not cover all the interested parties. So if we want the user prioritization, then we should do some pool and post it on the user list, and based on that. Because here the community, I don't think there is enough folks interested, or there are maybe too much folks interested. It's hard to figure out to just base decision on this room.
Yeah, but that's fine.
So the
Totally.
items that you have down
You
here.
go ahead. I mean, is there something on this list that you want?
Yeah, that's what I'm going.
Yeah, let's
on the
go
list
through the
that's over
list.
there, like the removed data chain notifications. So is that the target? for
The
beryllium?
target
That's the target.
lithium.
Oh, you are targeting that for lithium. Okay. There is a page already for that, so
Yeah.
So as a question which I want to ask, so you have two APIs. One is that one instance gets the remote data chain, the data chain notification from the master, and there's one where you will broadcast to all instances. So what if one instance wants to get an notification from the master and a local follower shard?
Only one local follower.
Whatever the local follower says, as suppose an example, because this was asked to me, that's why I'm asking the question. Is that if at all I want to get a notification from
You're
the
always going to get it from a local follower, by the way.
there isn't there.
We don't
I
have
don't
concept.
want my rest of the instances to get that. It's just this instance.
On what basis should we decide that you should get it and others should not get it?
By my registry, I am registering for the notification from
Saying
Spot.
So how we correlate your Java instance with the other Java instances in the controller, in the other JVMs? How we will correlate that? You will need to introduce some additional term to the API, which will be application ID. We don't have that.
How will you do it? That's one question. Does this use case have intent? That's what I'm trying to. Because this was asked to me. I'm not making this up like I just.
So
It does not have any, I feel it does not.
so it's just the difference that who does that? Does we enforce your application to select that I will register only on one node, or your application will register on 3 nodes, and based on our master shard election, we will figure out which nodes are turned off.
Like, say for example, an app decides that this instance of mine is going to be the active instance based on the mastership of an open flow. Now this instance is the main instance. Now I want to register for data notification on the config reader, but luckily the follower of the operational is there as well. So I want to register a data notification to the follower. I don't want to get all my instances across the cluster to get any kind of notification. I am the active one. Is this use case valid?
So,
In the data store to where to get notification.
So it's 3 o'clock.
I know.
It's 3 o'clock.
So how are you doing, our scribe?
What's the next
Should I send it to controller dev?
Oh yeah. MDSL dev and controller dev.
Okay.
So
Oh yeah, we have MDSL dev list.
actually next topic is also over here, right? Right here. What's
No, you're out of clustering.
what's the next topic?
Um,
I mean, I thought we were here
Go.
all day.
I will go outside, look into the agenda.
no clustering.
No, there's a break right now. No, there should be some.
No.
Cost center, data center.
Oh, okay.
Clustering never ends. I mean, you continue.
Sorry. See, but you get a half-hour break. Oh,
Yeah, that's what, that this is not representative. Even if you do the polling, if the people who voted for something which we are not believed to do, we probably won't do. If we don't believe in that, that's why we need more contributors.
No, but if they really want it, then
Yeah. But yeah, but the thing is, the best thing to get what you wanted is to help us do it. That's the fastest way how to get it done.
anyway, we have a whole session on what applications you want.
in a half hour.
Yeah, that's okay.
In tomorrow, no?
What's that?
You thought of stuff you need from us. For GBP,
Well, it's mostly everyone's favorite, which is OpenFlow plugin.
you're not doing that.
Sounded like I missed a fun session this morning.
Server implementation, and it will spin up a remote mount point implementation here, which will do the requests, and this will be true for all the nodes. Similar way how we are handling the RPCs, we are instantiating the RPC proxy in the controller node, in all the controller nodes, which does the routing via ACA to the node which implements the RPC.
Okay, so to enable this, to make it similar to RPC, this is going to be like a delegate. If the request comes to Netcom connector, it doesn't find it here, so it delegates to something else.
Yeah, it comes to the Mountpoint service. So you will register local Mountpoint service, which different implementation. Mountpoint service allows you to have multiple implementations, as anything in MDSAL. You will register the implementation which is baked by the ACA to route it to route and delegate to the real implementation on the remote node.
You know, Tony, it sounds like, or both of you guys, it sounds like the same, it sounds like very similar to RPCs. And we do gossip for that. I wonder if they're, using that for gossip.
Yeah, there is a gossip for that.
Gossip is, you know, so everybody knows about all the Netcom, where they are.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering.
And maybe use RPCs going forward as the remote mechanism.
If you connect over here, and let's say I get the schema from the device, why can't I just register all the RPCs on this as routed RPCs over here, so that if a request is made, like an RPC request is made, I use RPC connector to actually.
Oh, and now we come to the harder part.
That's what I was saying.
Yeah.
We use the RPCs.
And now we come to the harder part of that. Java applications are written against concrete model. This model is present in all the controllers, ACA-related thingies, just using the leadership service and voting. Yes. The next topic, which was we discussed how to do the Netcom clustering in such a way that it doesn't depend on which node you are using. You have access to the whole Netcom solution. You have access to all the Netcom operations available. There were two solutions proposed. One was basically the proxy. The connection is terminated on the node where it was configured. And the second was to have a full mesh. The combined solution is you have a full mesh, you have a master node, and all the requests are always routed to the master node. So given that, if we go that, to proxy the Netcom function and to route the information, all the Netcom functionality there, we will need to do small bit repackaging of the clustering. Because the Netcom itself is is a combination of the data broker, notification broker, and RPC broker.
It implements its own, right? It implements the same interface.
Yeah, it implements the same interface. And what we did for the root MDSAL is we have ACA clustering and remoting for these services, except the notifications, but we will do that probably. This pulls up. This actually creates us remoting of the MDSAL using this creates us the remoting of the MDSAL using the ACA, which we could use for the Netcom and which we could use for scaling out into the separate instances which are running different services and so on. So the Netcom clustering, if we go with all connected to everywhere and the proxy function, you still need that proxy function there to route the requests, which is no network clustering, it's Netcom clustering. Oh, we have a scribe.
Just trying to.
That's why you won the award.
Yeah.
That's great.
You are scribe. You are official Open Daylight scribe from now on. So I can use you when I will dictate the code and you will write it down?
Don't draw any pictures. Don't draw any pictures.
So if you're working on the award for next year, you start right now.
Yeah. I got to do something, man.
Okay, so
Can you explain how the proxy would work? I mean, you want to go into a little bit more detail?
so the proxy function is we need to make a Mountpoint service. I will use this one. Sure. So the idea behind the proxy, which was discussed and whiteboarded afterwards the session ended, is you have a 3-node cluster, or in the future, a lot of nodes. You have a user application. This could be external application, internal application. It doesn't matter from the MDSAL perspective in this use case. Talking to the Netcom device here. Netcom device is connected here.
Okay.
And what you really want is to route the request up here.
Correct.
So we will have a remote mount point,
So the routing
practically.
will be done, so when the request is made, will it end up at the Netconf connector on this node?
So,
And then it has to be routed this way.
so what we have in the MDSAL currently, it's called Mountpoint service. Mountpoint service needs cost.
I mean, how do you recommend?
So we end up with having a mastership service or leadership or
Yeah, that's going to be there. Assume it.
there is some service which
Yeah.
we call leadership service.
Well, mastership ownership, right?
Ownership service, okay.
Leader-
We'll decide on the name.
Kamal was right, we're using leader for Sharpie, I don't know.
So that's used for the master-slave visibility and master-slave election for the application terminology, which is outside of the data store terminology. So that's portable to the Lithium. Is that correct? That could be built on top of the Lithium.
It's a new API.
It's a new API, so we, you know, do waivers and whatever we have to do,
Okay.
whatever the process is, right?
The process isn't there yet. We will create it.
We'll create a process or whatever.
No, this is an addition, so it's not modifying any API, so.
I think
So,
it should be good to-
but original intention of the Lithium of the SRs are bug fix only branches. Addition is not a bug fix. Strictly speaking.
Bug, right? Open.
Missing clustering support? Yeah, I could classify everything as a bug.
Of course.
So this is a bug that happens to need to introduce a new API.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's what it is.
So that's legal. That falls under.
Okay, so this is targeting the Lithium. We have a mastership service. In its current form as is proposed. It will change over the time.
Okay.
So that's the ownership service. Then the another step is to take use of that ownership service in the OpenFlow clustering. Fortunately, OpenFlow clustering could be built without introducing any new where the application is deployed. Netconf is not. Netconf are using the model learned from the device, which are then in effect used by the RESTconf. So, and the Mountpoint contract is actually, the Mountpoint contract is four core MDSAL services together. The Mountpoint contract is, you have the RPCs, which are routed in its own domain of that Mountpoint. In Netcom, it's really simple, it's just forwarding to the device. You have the data broker contract. So basically you could read the data. You have notification contract, and you have a schema service contract. Because the Mountpoint itself can have its own schema. That's the difference. And basically, there is a proxy which needs to be accessed by the RESTconf in order to learn the schemas to provide the REST APIs for that particular Netcom device. So Mountpoint is much more heavyweight than just RPC.
Yeah, it's a schema, so you got to proxy the schema.
So that schema needs to be distributed here and here in order, if the RESTconf is running here, to use that schema for XML, for JSON and XML parsing.
Yeah, in order to parse it, it needs
No, which is fine. The schema can be distributed, right? Which is fine,
Yeah.
so that RESTconf can actually work properly over here. But why can't I still have, like, if I have a connection over here, all the RPCs in that schema, why can't they be registered as routed RPCs over here? So that if I invoke it from here, it somehow ends up.
So, the other concept, which is a bit different for the MDSAL. MDSAL is hierarchical. From the day zero, there was an idea that you have a root MDSAL. This one represents the controller. And then you could have a nested MDSALs, which have different properties. Similar to the shards, which may have different